Our gospel reading today comes from the 20th chapter of Matthew, verses 1 to 16. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. When he went out there about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and he said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. When he went out again about noon and at about 3 o'clock, he did the same thing. And about 5 o'clock, he went out and found others standing around, and he said to them, "Why are you standing here idle all day?" And they said to him, "Because no one has hired us." He said to them, "You also go into the vineyard." And when evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, "Call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first." When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. Now when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, "These last worked only 1 hour, and you've made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat." But he replied to one of them, "Friend, I'm doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous?" So the last will be first, and the first will be last. The grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of our God stands forever. I have an entire series of sermons entitled "A Christian Response to Things My Friend Eric Has Said." Eric has been gone now for 3 or 4 years. He's a watchmaker at Tiffany & Company. I've probably mentioned him before. He comes up a lot because he makes me think, or always used to. One of the last times I saw Eric, he told me about a German word, Lebensschneid. Lebensschneid. I've probably ruined the pronunciation. Those of you who actually speak German can probably correct it. But what it means is kind of life envy, except it's more than life envy. It's like, I suspect that you're having a better time of it than I am, and so I'm angry at you. And Eric's point to me as he was talking to me about Lebensschneid was that it tears people apart on the inside. It also tears apart the relationship between two people. He's seen things like that many times in his life, I'm sure. Well, it seems that the disciples are having that problem too. Peter, who's looking for a reward somehow, because after all, Peter and the disciples had given up everything to follow Jesus. And so they'd like to know what kind of reward they'll get in the afterlife, or maybe even right now in the reign of heaven. A certain amount of life envy going on there. You know, will we get a reward? What about those people over there? How will it be different? So Lebensschneid can show up in a lot of places. It shows up in teamwork. I've noticed that a lot of education now is done in teams, and certainly a lot of work in corporations is now done in teams. And, you know, when you have teamwork, sometimes you have a strong member of a team and sometimes a weak member of a team. And the strong member of the team who works really hard can look at the weak member of the team and feel Lebensschneid, like somehow the weak member of the team has gotten over something on you. You worked hard and that person did not. You figured out the math problem in this group of study hall people, and then somebody else just sort of goes along and gets it their way. Lebensschneid. I found that I run into it at the seminary. You know, seminary brings out the social justice, self-righteousness in people, I think. I know I was like that when I was in seminary. You would not believe the Lebensschneid that goes on in the seminary about these awful, rich Marin hot tubbers. Terrible. In fact, it's so bad that, I have a hot tub, so I always feel like I have to explain it, My mother gave me my hot tub not because she cared a lot about me, but because she didn't want to go anywhere where there wasn't a hot tub, so she got me one. But there's Lebensschneid, so people don't like those that have those hot tubs and live the high life, I guess. And then there's moments when you meet somebody who has a lot of talent at something. When you have a lot of talent at something, maybe you don't have to work too hard, or maybe you do work hard, but somebody who wants to have it, well, Lebensschneid. There's anger and there's frustration. It can tear you up on the inside. Worse still, suppose you meet somebody who doesn't have your talent, who really can't do the job as well as you, but nevertheless, that person has the job. It's not fair. Isn't that what the laborers said who'd been there early in the morning? It's not fair. And the trouble is that what that gets at underneath is that somehow if you don't get the reward, if life isn't fair to you, then maybe that actually means you're not worth much, not worth as much as you think you are. I mean, it's like the reward is a scorecard that tells you how good or bad you are. If you see somebody else getting a reward, well, they might be better. I mean, it taps into that moment of shame within us. Lebensschneid. That's how it works in the economic realm, but there's the moral realm. I mean, will I get a reward for being a good person? For not committing adultery, for instance, for not stealing? I mean, it seems only fair if I don't get the benefit of committing adultery, then I ought to get a reward for it, right? How come those people get to have such a good time having sex all the time? And what about the people who are able to steal and get away with it? People that lie all the time and end up in powerful positions. Where's the reward for me that I've done the right thing and they've done the wrong thing? Well, that would make sense unless you want to be in a world where, you do very little and just sit around doing nothing. And you're able to grab all the pleasure you can by lying and cheating and hurting the relationships that you're with. If you want to live a life like that, well, I guess I can understand Lebensschneid. It's not fair. They get to live this pointless, fruitless, immoral life that keeps them separate from everybody else. So you'd feel Lebensschneid, but it does seem a little ridiculous. People like that, they desperately need to reach out for all kinds of pleasure, that pleasure that takes the place of something real. That's where addictions come from a lot of the time. You need to fill up your life with things that will anesthetize that sense of emptiness, hollowness, and loss. Lebensschneid. The reign of heaven is different. I mean, what's the difference between the laborers early in the morning and the laborers in the evening? They both get the same reward. Well, the difference is that the laborers that have been there all day, they got to work in the kingdom of heaven all day long. The ones that showed up at 5 o'clock missed all that time. They weren't able to do that work, to live that life of meaning during that period of time. That's the difference. It's not about the reward. It's about what kind of a life it is that we want to live. There's no shame in a life that's given over to the kingdom of heaven, to the work of God that's drawing all things together in perfect harmony. Because there's no comparison. You are a person that is precious in the sight of God. There are no rewards and punishments because there's no scorecard to tell you that you're wonderful. You are absorbed into the love of God. You're an expression of God's love. That's the joy of the kingdom of heaven, the reign of heaven. Turns out that my friend Tommy was wrong. It is not funner to be bad than good. If we live a life that distorts relationships, we will be lonely. The kingdom of heaven is about useful work that builds up the people around us. The kingdom of heaven is about intimacy with the presence of God and God's love, a love that is shared all around us. Lebensschneid. Nothing to be jealous of, really. When you run into people who lie and cheat and don't do much and miss intimacy, nothing to envy, nothing to hope for. No, there's real pleasure in the intimacy of the reign of heaven. Real pleasure and joy in the living out of God's law. It's built in pretty deep in our culture that we think it's funner to be bad than good. We might not put it that plainly, but it's not true. And if you haven't figured that out yet, then you've missed what the reign of heaven is about. If you think the reign of heaven is a drag, is something that's not worth doing, if you think the reign of heaven is something to be avoided, then you've missed what it really is. It's a connection to the God that is unfolding evolution before our very eyes, that is bringing beauty about. Every time we see the destruction in the world, we can watch, and we'll watch God bring beauty out of that situation. It's the nature of God to do it in your life, to do it through our lives to other people. That's the work we're called to. If you can't see that living a life, working in the reign of heaven, is one of joy and intimacy, you're missing out. And instead, you'll end up with a life that's torn apart from the inside out, with Lebensschneid. So hear the good news. You are loved by God. I say it over and over. I don't care what you think you've done or left undone. You are loved by God. And whether or not you have served in the kingdom of heaven for 1 minute or all your life, the reward you get is the connection and the intimacy with the one who's brought you into being and seeks a wonderful, full, and complete life. Let us pray.